If there is a great interval between but I and I went, the sentence becomes obscure. One thing, therefore, requisite to correct diction is a proper disposition in the conjunctions. A second is, to call things by their proper names, and not to circumscribe them by generic and common names. A third is, not to use ambiguous words. But these precepts are to be observed, unless the contraries to them are preferred, which those do, who when they have nothing to say, pretend to say something. For men of this kind in poetry thus speak, as for instance Empedocles. For circumlocution deceives, if it be much, and the auditors are affected in the same manner as the multitude are by those who predict future events, since when they speak ambiguously, the vulgar assent to what they say. If Croesus passes over the river Halys, he will destroy a mighty empire. But the reason why, when we have nothing to say, we should use generic terms, is, because in short, the error will be less. And on this account, diviners speak through the genera of a thing. For in the game of even and odd, he will be less likely to err who says that a number is even or odd in general, than if he determines what number is so. And he who predicts that a certain event will be, is less likely to err, if he only says that it will be, than if he assigns the time when it will be. Hence, those who deliver oracles do not define the time when a thing will happen. All these generic and ambiguous names, therefore, are to be avoided, unless they are adopted for the sake of some such purpose as we have mentioned. A fourth thing requisite to correct diction is, as Protagoras divided the genera of nouns into masculine, feminine, and instruments, or neuter, to employ these rightly, as, She coming and discoursing departed. A fifth requisite is to denominate rightly in many and few things, and in one thing, as, But they coming struck me. In short, it is requisite that what is written should be so written as to be read and pronounced with facility. But this is not the case when there are many conjunctions, and when what is written cannot be easily pointed. And such are the writings of Heraclitus. For it is laborious to point the writings of Heraclitus, because it is immanifest what should be conjoined with the prior or posterior part, as in the beginning of his book. For he there says, Of reason existing always men are ignorant, since it is immanifest whether the word always pertains to the prior or to the posterior part. Farther still, a solecism is produced in composition when to two words another appropriate word is not conjoined. Thus to noise and colour, seeing is not a common, i.e. is not an appropriate word, but sensible perception is common. The composition also is rendered obscure from the insertion of much which is intermediate, unless the part which corresponds to the first part of a sentence is immediately subjoined, and the rest added, as, My intention was, after I had mentioned such and such things to him, to go. But this obscurity would be avoided by saying, My intention was, after I had spoken to him, to go, and then to add, Having mentioned to him such and such things. CHAPTER 6. The following particulars contribute to the amplitude of diction. To use definition or description instead of a name, as instead of saying a circle to say, a plane figure in which all lines drawn from the middle to the circumference are equal. But the contrary contributes to conciseness, viz. To the use of the name instead of the definition. Amplitude of diction is also affected, if when anything disgraceful or indecorous is to be expressed, the name is used when the disgraceful thing is in the definition, but the definition if it is in the name. It is likewise affected by rendering a thing manifest by metaphors and epithets, avoiding at the same time what is poetical, and by causing one thing to be many, i.e. by using the plural instead of the singular number, which the poets do ; for when there is but one part, they nevertheless say, " Into the Achaean parts," and instead of saying, " The complication of an epistle," they say, "The complications of epistles." Amplitude is also effected by separating what we can conjoin ; as, " This woman, this our wife." But if we wish to speak concisely, we must say on the contrary, " This woman our wife." And it is effected by using a conjunction. But if we wish to speak concisely, we must not employ a conjunction, yet the sentence must not be unconnected, as in the first case, " Going and speaking to him," and in the second, " Going, I spoke to him." The method of Antimachus likewise is useful for this purpose, viz. to enumerate particulars which a thing does not possess ; which he does, speaking of the hill Teumessus ; for he says, " A little hill there is, exposed to wind." For thus we may amplify to infinity ; and this may take place both in what is good and what is bad, by enumerating what is not inherent, in whatever way it may be useful to the oration. Hence, also, poets derive the words chordless and lyreless melody ; for these words are derived from privations. But what we have just said is adopted in metaphors taken from the analogous ; such for instance as to say, " That the sound of a trumpet is a lyreless melody." CHAPTER VII. Diction, also, will possess what is decorous, if it is pathetic and ethical, and analogous to the subject matter. But the analogous is effected by neither speaking of things grand and magnificent slightly, nor of abject things venerably and magnificently, nor giving ornament to a vile appellation. For if this is not adopted, the composition will appear to be a comedy, which is the case with that of Cleon. For some things which he writes are just as if a man should say, " A venerable fig." Diction becomes pathetic by reciting insolent behaviour in the language of an angry person ; but when conduct has been impious and shameful, then the diction becomes pathetic, by speaking indignantly and cautiously. And when conduct has been laudable, this is effected by speaking with admiration. But in things of a lamentable nature, the pathetic is produced by a humble diction. And the like method must be adopted in other things. Appropriate diction, also, persuades to the truth of a thing. For the soul of the auditor is deceived by false reasoning, in consequence of conceiving that the orator speaks the truth, because the auditors are thus affected in such like orations. Hence they fancy that things are as the orator says, though they are not so. The auditor, likewise, becomes similarly affected with him who speaks pathetically, though he should say nothing to the purpose. Hence, many astonish the hearers by the tumultuous manner in which they deliver their orations. Moreover, ethical diction is a demonstration from signs ; because this when appropriate is consequent to every genus and habit. But I mean by genus, indeed, age, such as a child, or a man, or an old man ; sex, as man or woman ; and nation, as a Lacedaemonian or a Thessalian. And by habits I mean those things which produce the variety of conditions in life. For the lives of men are not such as they are according to every habit. If, therefore, the diction has appellations adapted to the habit, it will become ethical. For a rustic and a well*educated man will not say the same things, nor speak after the same manner. But the auditors are somewhat affected by that figure which the writers of orations abundantly use ; as, " Who does not know this ? All men know it." For the auditor, from shame, confesses that he participates of that knowledge of which every one else partakes. Opportune, however, or not